Frank, welcome to the show.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Seriously, Frank, thanks for being here. I created this podcast for people like yourself, actually. You are a comedian who has an amazing story and background, who also speaks on suicide prevention. And I think that you try to bring enough awareness to help as many people as you can. And you use your
Yes.
platform to normalize such a taboo topic as suicide, which I respect and applaud, and I appreciate it as well. How do you get here?
Well, how far back do you want me to go?
So as far as we can go.
Okay, it's fourth grade. I'm 9 years old. I tell a joke. The kids laugh. The teacher's hysterical. At that moment, at 9 years old, I decided I was going to be a stand-up comedian. In 12th grade, they had a talent show at high school. Nobody had ever done stand-up before. It's the spring of 1975. So I did stand-up and I won. I won the talent show. Of course, I beat the accordion player and the folk dancers. Not a big win, but and then I told my mother I was going to go to LA to be a comedian, and she said, "You're going to college first. I don't care what you do when you get done. You can be a goat herder for all I care. But you're going to be a goat herder who has a college degree." So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, picked up a BA and a BS, and then headed for the West Coast. The insurance company I went to work for in Raleigh, where I was from, transferred me to San Diego. And just by chance in San Diego, to this day, there's a branch of the world famous Comedy Store, the one up on Sunset in La Jolla. And I did my first 5 minutes on April 1st, 1984. Halfway through my 5 minutes, I heard a voice inside my head, "You're home." And my second thought was, I'm going to do this for a living. I had no idea how. 18 months later, said to my girlfriend, now my wife of 37 years, "I'm going on the road to be a comedian. You want to come along?" Figuring she'd go, "Hell no." She goes, "Yeah." So we gave up the apartment and our jobs, jumped into my tiny Dodge Colt, and we were on the road for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop. That's 7 years and change. No other road comic ever came close. And did a little radio after that. And then when I got fired in radio, because there's two kinds of people in radio: people who've been fired, people who are going to be fired. The comedy club thing was winding down, so I was a clean comic. So I jumped to corporate comedy after dinner, after lunch at conventions. And people ask me, what's the difference between a club comic and a corporate comic? About $5,000 a day plus travel. I'm no math major, but so I rode that horse until the end of 2007, did 96 engagements in 2007, grossed over $200,000 telling jokes. And then the bottom dropped out of the world economy. And speaker bookings, comedy bookings dropped off 80%. We lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. That's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like, literally. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine came up after a keynote recently. He'd never heard me say that. And he goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?" That's where the comedy is in suicide, not jokes, but funny personal anecdotes. So when speaking came back, meeting planners said to me, speakers bureaus said to me, "Frank, we love you. We can't pay you $5,000 anymore just to be funny. You got to teach us something." What? I had no idea how to make that jump. But a friend of mine, Judy Carter, wrote a book called The Message of You, Turning Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. She gave me a copy, said, "Frank, read it, you'll figure it out." I went into it thinking I got nothing. Halfway through, I thought, oh, yes, I do. Given that I live with two mental illnesses, that I came close to suicide, that there are more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd, that if I got some training in suicide prevention, I could keynote on that. So I did. And my second hurdle was, been a comic for 2.5 decades. Who's going to take me seriously? So that's when I did my first TEDx on suicide prevention. And then 2 other TEDx events contacted me shortly thereafter and said, "Do you have any more mental health topics?" Oh, yeah. All my 12 TEDx talks have mental health. It's a mental health topic, one aspect or another. And I just booked number 13 for November, which also is a world record. And that began my suicide prevention speaking. That was 2012. And then, 2014. And then I decided in 2018 that suicide prevention speaking was all I was going to talk about. I mean, if you want to book me for one of my other keynotes, great, but I'm not going to market those. And I chose half a dozen of the top 10 U.S. industries at risk for suicide. And I only market to the top half dozen. And construction, veterinary medicine, agriculture, and so on. And my belief is, speaking or being an entrepreneur of any stripe, you need to pick a lane, be the expert, the thought leader, be the best in that, so that when they come looking for your topic, they don't look for just anybody, they come looking for you. That's the theory. And so that's what I've been doing since 2018, and still do comedy occasionally. I did the YouTube series Dry Bar Comedy. If you go to Dry Bar Comedy on YouTube, type my name in, you'll find my special. But I don't do comedy clubs. I wouldn't do a comedy club now, short of a plea bargain. I'm way too old, and people are way too sensitive. And when I was starting out in comedy, if you didn't like the show, you went to the box office, got your money back. You didn't stand up and take issue with the comic and then blast them on Facebook. So things have changed. Anyway, that's how I got here. I coach how to land and leverage TEDx, and I coach how to make money speaking on cruises, colleges, corporations, associations. I've been doing stand up on cruises since 2009, about 12 weeks a year. And so I can help people get booked on cruises, colleges. I've been doing colleges since 89, and corporations, associations. That's my coaching. And as I told you, I'm putting the finishing touches on an online TEDx coaching program and community. We're creating a program, also a community platform where there'll be like a Facebook group on steroids. There'll be networking events, collaboration opportunities, motivation, inspiration. I'll do once a week an hour on Ask Frank Anything. I'll have other speakers on. If you land at TEDx, then we'll do a live showcase so you can practice in front of real human beings. So one to not just an online course. That's kind of lonely with no support. We're creating this community where we even have it's called the College of Speaking Knowledge, and any college worth its salt has a bar nearby. So we have the speaker saloon where we go and celebrate when somebody gets to TEDx.
There you go. There you go. Now, Frank, it's been quite an amazing and uncommon story, right? And you can mix your comedy background, your public speaking with TEDx, about to break the record of 13 in November. You can talk about your mental illnesses, and that's your motivation behind um, the the reason why you're trying to bring awareness. And I watched a couple of your TEDx talks, and one of the things you said is like that you suffer from, and I want to make sure that I get this right, that you suffer from a chronic depression, clinic which is clinical depression, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So basically, you have some sort of chemical imbalances in your brain as well.
Yes,
Just
it's in
can't,
my
yeah,
DNA. It's called
DNA.
generational depression and suicide. Grandmother died by suicide. Great aunt, my mother. I came close. Yeah, it's. People say to me, "How'd you pick suicide as a topic?" Well, you know what? The topic picked me.
Yeah. Now, so you and one thing that I saw on your talks is, as you mentioned, you suffer from chronic suicidality,
Yep.
which, in your own words, like the option of killing yourself is always on the menu,
Correct.
which impacts a lot of people. And I wasn't aware that that was the thing. And how do you stop yourself, or how have you stopped yourself over this last whatever 30, 40 years of actually doing it?
Well, it's really it's chronic suicidal ideation or chronic suicidality, and it means, as you said, that I and people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And when I say small, I tell the audience my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had three thoughts unbidden: one, get it fixed; two, buy new; and three, I could just kill myself. That's just the way my brain works. It's just a way to cope with stress. So it doesn't come with a plan, time, place, method. It's just a passing thought. I've had so many times. The upside of telling that story, by the way, in my keynote, is that almost always when I do it, there's one person, maybe more, in the audience who has chronic suicidal ideation. They have no idea it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and they're completely alone. And last month, I told that story, and a young woman came up after my keynote, and she's crying so hard she couldn't speak. And I said, "You have chronic suicidal ideation." She nods, and I go, "You didn't know it had a name. You thought you were just some kind of freak." Nod. "Do you have a therapist back home?" Nod. "We'll do this. When you get home, make an appointment. Tell them what you learned. For God's sakes, tell them you Googled it. Don't tell them you learned it from a comedian." And a week later, I got an email. She said, "Frank, I think I was at that conference in large part simply to meet you and you've changed my life. And I cannot say that about a lot of people. So there's the ROI right there.
That's amazing. But I can. I've been somebody who have gone through depression. Actually, I wouldn't call myself somebody who's clinical depressed, but in the last 15 years of my life, I've been ups and downs of depressive episodes that have lasted 6 months, a year, 2 years. In fact,
Mm,
I'm in the thick of, I'm in the thick of one right now. Since 2022, I've been sort of most seems like on the tail end,
mm,
but this is our circumstantial. Just recently, I got divorced, so that impacted quite a lot. But even before that, I was depressed to a point that I remember February 2022. I was waking up every morning with just deep sadness, and then that increased over time to a point that if I was driving to a grocery store, if I was driving to the gym, if I was driving to work, the only thing I wanted to do was just to go back home, lock myself in the bathroom, and just cry. It was that kind of depression. And I'm not gonna lie, I never truly consider suicide, but I'm going to admit that I've had those intrusive thoughts that cross your mind that
mm.
you're jumping off a bridge or jumping off a building, not to a point where, oh shit, I'm gonna do it. But and that's why to me, talking to you is so fascinating because if I can I've had breaks of 3 or 4 years with no depression, right? It
Mhm.
seems like you have this very often, but also you have the thoughts as a way to solve a problem to kill yourself. How do
Mhm.
you actually stop yourself from actually doing it and having that self control and awareness of knowing, hey, that is not going to solve the issue. There are other ways I could solve it.
Well, the revelation was when I was diagnosed with chronic suicidal ideation. I mean, that helped because I realized it's a thing. Other people have it, and other people survive it. And I tell people that have it that that I enlighten, they have it. I go, here's the good news: you do not have to act on the thought. It's just a thought. It's just a coping mechanism. It's the way your brain deals with stress. So it's not a serious. It's rarely a serious thought. Every now and then, under a great deal of stress, I pick a time, a place, and a method in my head. That's as close as I come. Uh, the the and my depressive episodes, the two are not. I mean, I've been suicidal and not depressed, depressed and not suicidal. I have major depressive disorder, and my cycle is 3 days, and it happens every so often. First day I go down, second day I flatten out, third day I come back up. And I used to say I fight depression, but I realized fight implies I can win, and I can't win. I can kill myself and lose, or I can, tie like North and South Korea, kind of an uneasy truce. And I think of it as a wave rather than push back against it. I think of it as riding a wave and going forward with the energy until the wave breaks and I'm flying level again. Because it takes a lot of energy to fight it, and it's ridiculous. You can't beat it. And the episodes are farther apart after I started taking medication when I was 60. It doesn't make me giddy, but it just takes the edge off and makes the episodes farther apart. So that's yeah. A friend of mine says depression is a visitor. It comes, it stays, it leaves. So, but the problem for younger people, is they haven't been through these episodes that many times. So, and people with depression, this, they think in the immediate. They think it's not going to be any better than this. Why don't I just kill myself? Because I don't think it's going to get any better than this. And a lot of people don't understand because they'll say, why did so and so want to kill themselves? Well, probably they didn't want to kill themselves. Most people don't want to kill themselves. They just want to end the pain. And that's the only way they can see to, you know, to do it. I mean, there are people who, for other reasons, they do have reasons to kill themselves, but most people, I think, just want to end the pain.
No, I totally understand and agree with you. In fact, I've mentioned this before. I grew up in a household in which I always heard that those who committed suicide were just cowards that couldn't face their problems. And I grew up with that thought. And but then once you're in the thick of it, of the emotional pain, and then you're trying to make it through the day, and you don't even know when you're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You say, now I understand. Now I get why people take that as the last resource, because I can tell you, I remember a few months, August, September, October 2022. I was just trying to make it through the day, and it was tough. And I could definitely see, luckily for me, I never truly consider that, but I know that a lot of people have done it. In fact, I was just looking, just getting ready for our talk. I was checking the CDC website, and according to them, in 2022, almost like 50,000 people committed suicide, and close to 80% of that, which is roughly what 39 people, were men. And those
Yeah.
numbers keep increasing.
Eight
In
out
your
of
experience,
10, 8 out of 10, roughly 8 out of 10 suicides in the US these days are men. And by the way, when I started, I did my first TEDx talk. That number was not 50,000, it was 39,000. So it's gotten 11,000 worse since 2014. One person in the US dies by suicide every 9 minutes. And hardly anybody talks about it unless you bring it up. And then almost everybody has a story. And that's really my job. My first TEDx was the theme was start the conversation on suicide. Because if you mention it out loud, people line up after my talk. 2 people, 4 people, 10 people want to share a story, ask a question, to the point where I do a general Q&A. And before I start that, I go, look, we're going to do a general Q&A. Now, if you've got a question you want to ask or a story you want to share, but you don't want to share with everybody, I'll hang out an extra 30, 45 minutes. I'll take them all individually. And I mean, they line up.
yeah, that's very kind of wonderful of you, because what you're saying is true. What I felt like, people have such a fear and taboo to the word suicide, to the point that even my therapist, once she sees me very depressed, or she sees me that I'm hanging by a thread, she would ask something like, "Are you thinking about hurting yourself, or are you thinking about doing something stupid?" People are afraid of putting the word killing yourself or suicide
Yeah.
in conversation. And I think in my mind is, well, if I say I have a friend who is depressed, I'm afraid to say the word. I guess my fear is, I don't want to plant that seed in their brain. No, that seed is already there. It's already a tree, right? That person already have thought about it. So you normalizing this, and I know that probably in your TEDx talks, a lot of people feel uncomfortable. I'm sure it's just um, how how they're not used to talking about this topic this raw,
No.
which absolutely not. So based on the stories that you have heard from people, whether in the general Q&A, or when they do like a one-on-one with you,
Hmm.
what is the most challenging thing that men are struggling with in today's, let's say,
Well,
in
toxic
today's world?
masculinity, or as we
Okay.
said when I was a kid, big boys don't cry. Men, they tend not to reach out for help, whether it's physical or mental. I had 2 friends die, one of prostate cancer, one of colon cancer. Both are imminently treatable if you catch them early, if you have a PSA test for the prostate, and if you have a colonoscopy. If you catch it early, you're going to survive it. But men tend to neglect their physical health and don't talk about their mental health. That's really my superpower, is getting on stage as a man and saying, I came this close to killing myself. I have these 2 mental illnesses. The vulnerability, it gives other people permission to give voice to their feelings and experience. That's why they line up. And most of those conversations start like this. I've never told anybody this. Well, I get that a lot, because in some states, maybe all of them, if you tell your therapist you're having thoughts of suicide, they're often duty bound to drag you in front of a judge and see if they should give you a 3-day involuntary hold. So I think if we could back off on that a little bit, give people permission to give voice without being worried about being locked down, might save. I'd like to make talking about suicide as comfortable as talking about sports. It's and by the way, there's an old wives' tale that if you say the word suicide, you should never say the word suicide in front of somebody who's depressed. And I love the reasoning; it might give them the idea, but as you said, it's crossed my mind. Uh, and the irony is the odds of them dying by suicide, if you mention it, go down rather than up. But people are afraid, A, to say the wrong thing, B, don't know what to say, so they don't say anything. And that's what I'm teaching I'm empowering my audiences. I say to them at the end, look, here's the good news. 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to an attempt. Meaning you can make a difference. You can save a life. And you can do it by doing something as simple as this: starting a conversation, if you know how, and I just taught you how. So I'm empowering them to go out. You don't have to be a mental health professional to stop a suicide. Anybody can. if you know what you're doing.
I understand, but I think that sometimes it is hard because when I was going through hell, pretty much, I remember that I used to work out with a group of people, outdoor workout, and I was wearing a facade. I was just joking. I was smiling, but for that 1 hour, I was a different person, right?
Hmm.
And then I started looking. I was like, this is how people are looking at me. Nobody has any clue how I truly feel. Now, it's also my fault for not being vulnerable and open, and that kept me thinking, or that I started thinking about, if that's how I am behaving and reacting right now, how many people are out there doing the same thing, wearing a facade because they don't want to come across as somebody who's ruining the mood or just bringing the energy down? And as you said, it's uncomfortable for some people. So we don't want to feel that, oh, I'm making you uncomfortable. So I'm not going to show my emotions. Therefore, it is hard to catch signs in many occasions.
Well, and there are signs of depression. Top three for me are they eat too much or can't eat, sleep too much or can't sleep. They have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, so they're often late to work or school. However, in the afternoon, they often tend to rally like a different person. And here's one you can observe visually. Normally, in the past, they've been pretty well put together. And this day, hair's dirty, clothes aren't quite so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning, simply to run a load of wash and take a shower. So there are signs, and that's what I teach the audience. Here's what you look for. Here's the signs you look for in case they haven't told you or won't tell you, but you suspect. And signs of thoughts of suicide. If they don't admit it, but you think they're having, thoughts of suicide, they talk about death and dying. You catch them Googling death, dying, or how to die by suicide. They are accumulating the means, either stockpiling medications or buying a firearm. They're getting their affairs in order, going around and speaking to people, friends, relatives, maybe they haven't spoken to in a long time, essentially saying goodbye, but they don't say goodbye. They're giving away prized possessions because they want to make sure the possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. And here's a counterintuitive one that's really dangerous, and I've heard this a number of times, is they've been depressed for a long time, but now they're happy for no reason. And you're happy because they're happy. The problem is they may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is coming to an end. That's very dangerous.
And I think that happens more often than we think, because it is interesting with a lot of people that have committed suicide, especially like high profile people. You
Hmm.
see, but he seemed happy. He seemed, in fact, I have a friend of mine who used to follow this couple. um there were a couple of dancers. The guy who committed suicide was, he used to be a lot in Ellen DeGeneres. I think his name was Twitch,
Yes,
like
Rich. Uh-huh.
Afro American. Yes. So this friend of mine was showing me videos of beautiful family, right? Wife and a couple of kids, all happy, making funny videos and all of that. And then one time he took a cab, went to a hotel, and just shot himself. Is and when they was talking to the wife Allison, after, like months, weeks after, it's like, I never saw it coming. And it's just hard because you feel that your partner, your friend, your significant other, whoever, your coworker is happy, as you mentioned, and okay, it seems like all bad stuff is in the past. And no, the person's like, I'm ending my pain 2 weeks from now, a day from now, or whatever the case may be.
Yes. Well, I liken it to we have German Shepherds and we train them from puppies. And you'll hear people say, the dog bit me and he never gave any indication he was going to. Well, the thing is, the dog probably threw off a couple, three hints if you know what to look for. First thing is the dog freezes. And the second thing is the ears go back. Third is the most obvious, the hackles go up. And so the dog's throwing off signs like, don't come over here, don't come over here, don't come over here. The dog does not want to bite you. But so suicide's often like that. The signs are there, the hints in that last week, and maybe kind of thinly veiled, or the signs are there. It's one of my friends and one of my co-authors on 4 books we wrote on men's mental health calls it the tyranny of hindsight. You think back, and once you hear those signs and symptoms, you're like, oh man, it was right there. He did give a hint. He did do this. He did do that. That's why I educate people as to what to look for so they can be So at least you can. It may be innocent, whatever happened, but at least you can ask and start the conversation. There's a company I did a safety day for on suicide. They changed their company protocol. If somebody says to you, "Are you depressed?" you have to say, by company regulation, "Thank you for asking." So it takes the onus off, that they think they're going to get harshed if they ask. "Thanks for asking. No, we have a new baby. I've been up 2 nights, haven't slept a wink. That's why." "Oh, great. Okay." So I just, your behavior changed. I thought maybe something was wrong. So yeah, it's all about, observing and keeping an eye on everybody. One of the trainings I took is called gatekeeper training. You're the guy at the gate or the gal at the gate, the woman at the gate. You're watching people come and go, and you're watching them for signs and symptoms of depression, thoughts of suicide.
See, I feel that kind of information, that kind of knowledge is hopefully could change a lot of people's lives. My only concern would be, I feel, and this is mostly on people. People are so distracted. People have such a short attention of span, right? They're so distracted with whatever themselves or social media, or that is, it is hard unless you intentionally put the effort to just watch somebody and really pay attention to somebody. I think that a lot of these signs or clues get missed or just get lost in
Hmm.
people's daily lives. How can people do a better job to notice this without getting distracted so easily?
Well, you're right. All that incoming information every day from a variety of sources, it's terribly distracting. I think once you've heard me speak and you've heard the signs and symptoms, you can't unhear that. And so hopefully, if somebody says something or says, "Here's my Xbox. Wow, this is like your prized possession." "I know, but I want you to have it." Okay, if you haven't heard me speak, you would think, "Well, great, thanks very much." That's, if you've heard me speak, you're like, "Wait a minute. Why are you giving away prized possessions? Are you having thoughts of suicide?" It happened actually in a funny way, and there was no suicide in it, but I spoke to a group of dentists, and I talked about giving away prized possessions. Several months later, I got an email from one of the dentists, and he said, "Frank, I got to tell you, my wife and I were downsizing from like a 4,000 square foot house to a 2,000 square foot house. So I had to get rid of a bunch of stuff. And so I put it all on Facebook, to sell or give away or whatever. I mean, and another dentist saw the post on Facebook and saw that he was giving away his favorite set of golf clubs. So he called him up. "Dude, you're giving away prized possessions. Are you thinking of suicide?" "No, we're downsizing. We're getting a smaller house." So it triggered in that other guy's mind when he saw all this stuff on Facebook the guy was giving away. Oh, dear God. So, yeah, so I'm hoping that by opening people's minds to this, and, it's like buying a new car, whatever kind of car you buy. And then all of a sudden, everywhere you look, there's one of those cars. There's an Outback. So hopefully it raises that, changes that part of your brain where you will pick up the signals because you now know what to look for.
Yeah, it's just like that very typical experiment of the red car. How many red cars do you see when you came over here? I don't know. And then when you go back, oh, I saw so many because now
Yeah.
it's in your head. It makes total sense. And I knew already a few of the signs because of by looking at how I was behaving, but other ones were just really they really opened my eyes, like people giving away some prized possessions, whether it's just an Xbox, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a camera, that you wouldn't think much about it, and then yeah, I mean it could be a sign of of that. You mentioned, by the way, that that you were close to committing suicide, and I think if I recall from your TEDx talk, it was April of 2010,
Hmm.
right? And which was a very pivotal moment in your life. How long did you hold the gun inside your mouth,
Oh,
and what made you?
it was just a practice session, just see if I could do it. Put it in my mouth, pull the hammer back. Uh,
Okay.
because we had filed bankruptcy. My wife was devastated, and I had $1 million life insurance policy. And so I thought I could fix this. In suicidality, there's something called burdensomeness. Oftentimes people feel they're a burden. that the world would be better off without them. And that's why when people say it's selfish, didn't you think about the people you're going to leave behind? As a matter of fact, most people are thinking about the people they're leaving behind, thinking they'll be better off. And I knew my wife would be better off financially. She'd be brokenhearted, but she wouldn't be broke anymore. So I went and practiced. And then I called my insurance agent because I had sold life insurance after college. And I knew every policy had a 2-year suicide clause. So I called him to find out how long I'd had it. And I had it only 22 months. So I had to wait 60 days to kill myself. That's why we're having this conversation. And within 60 days, things got a little better. The bankruptcy went through. The phone calls from the creditor stopped. Life must have gotten just marginally better so that I didn't think about it on day 61 or 2 or 3. I don't even remember the next time it crossed my mind that oh, wait, I could do it today. Fortunately.
Do you ever think, I'm sure you do, how close you were from literally pulling the trigger?
Yeah, well, that's in my keynote. I say, I've come close enough, I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like, literally. And by the way, a psychologist busted me once after an event. I spoke on suicide prevention. And he came up afterwards. He goes, "Hey, what qualifies you to speak about suicide prevention? You're not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist of any kind." And I said, "Because I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like." And in the silence that followed, I said, "Look, I could go to college and learn absolutely everything you know. You will never know everything I know." And that's what qualifies me.
You are in the perfect position to teach and to talk about a topic that affected you most of your life, or pretty much all your life, because you can empathize and you can understand exactly, as you said, what other people have felt. And exactly, it is different when somebody is book smart. Okay, I can
Yep.
tell you, oh, whatever these symptoms are, but have you experienced them? Because if I know that you have experienced them, then I can be more open to you. I can connect with you because I know that you understand me.
Yeah. We hear the same music. And not only did I survive my own near suicide, my grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. So I am also a suicide loss survivor several times over. So I can relate to people who've simply lost someone to suicide. It's 25% of the population roughly has a mental challenge. And so when I bare my soul, those 25 are leaning forward because they're thinking, this is an academic. This is his life. So yeah, like I said, it opens up. They feel more comfortable. They tell me you wouldn't. I did a presentation in Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, on site construction site, and afterwards, half dozen people lined up, men, because mostly they were men. The last guy in line was a young black fellow, probably mid-20s, and he's crying so hard he can't speak. It's a pattern after a while. And so I waited till he gathered himself. I said, "Man, what's up?" He said, "I haven't slept for 2 nights. I work on the fifth floor of this project, and I think about jumping off every day." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I've lost 3 people close to me in the last year to violence, including my daughter who died in my arms."
Wow.
So the HR guy who hired me was standing not far away, and I waved him over. And I said, "Listen, you need to take this young man by the hand, go find the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program binder, find the closest mental health facility, and get him there ASAP for evaluation, simply evaluation, because he's circling the drain." So a couple of months later, I had a reason to talk to the meeting planner, the HR guy, and I was terrified to ask. But finally, I worked up my courage. I said, "How's that young black man, Frank?" He got evaluated and medicated. He's back on the job. Oh, man.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, and I would wager none of his workmates had ever heard that story, and probably a lot of his relatives had never heard that story. And I gave him, by speaking and being vulnerable, I gave him permission to come up and share that, and that may be why he's alive today.
Yeah. It's incredible, and I cannot imagine how just trying to have the courage to ask the HR person, say, "Hey, I know. I mean, when you are when you put yourself in his shoes, yeah. I mean, what is? do you have any other reason to live? And we can think, once we're okay, all the many reasons why it's
Yeah.
worth living and keep living. But when you're in that position, when you lost your daughter, when you lost three people in the last year, it's like, why even trying anymore?
Yes.
Is
Well, and if you ask somebody, let's say you ask them if they're suicidal, yes. Do you have a plan? Yes. So your next question is, what is the plan? And if the plan is detailed, time, place, and method, you you get them to a mental health facility immediately. But and I've never seen anything like this in the literature, and I've never seen anyone say what to do next. If the plan is there, but it's not detailed, what would you do? And so what I came up with was I would say to them, okay, um, are you going to kill yourself? If they say no, I would say, okay, tell me why not. Make them give voice to whatever's keeping them here because something, kids, parents, religion, pets, something is keeping them here. And then I would leverage whatever they told me to keep them safe for another day.
That's a very, very smart way of doing it. Just because even if you even if you don't use it as a leverage, it creates the exercise for themselves to find reasons why not.
Yes. Yeah. Give voice to it. Tell me why you're still here. Something's
Yeah, and
keeping, something's keeping you here.
yeah, and when you mentioned earlier, a lot earlier, it's just that most people don't want to kill themselves. I heard a story probably 10, 15 years ago of a guy that he jumped off a building. I think it was like fourth floor, and he made it. I mean, he survived that attempt. Then when they interviewed him afterwards, a few days, a few weeks, I don't know, he said that in the moment that it was in the air, something snapped inside of him, and he realized that he didn't want to kill himself. That all his problems, whatever those were solvable. But the problem is when you use a gun, or when you use pills, or when you just cut your uh, wrist or whatever. Those are almost immediate. You don't have that chance of that, even 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds when you're in the middle of it, to realize, man, this was a wrong thing to do. And it's just, again, I want people to understand, those who have never gone through a thought process like that, or never felt that way, that most of us who has thought about it never really wanted to do it to begin with.
Well, and 3 times as many women attempt as men. Men tend to complete because they use a
More,
firearm. There's generally no coming back. Women use pills or a razor blade or some other method where you could, if you change your mind, you could call 911, help, I've taken too many pills, or you can make yourself throw up. Or if, you could stop the bleeding. Men, for whatever reason, tend to use a firearm.
yeah. See, on one of your talks, I want to bring two names up that you mentioned on your talks. One was Kate Spade, and the other one was Anthony Bourdain.
Yep.
Two very famous people that seem to, one fashion icon, the other one seemed to be living a dream life, traveling around the world, eating amazing food, something that was passionate to him, and
Yep.
talking to people that were passionate about. And until one day they just couldn't take it anymore, regardless of their success. And you put it beautifully, and explained perfectly what I've been trying to explain to people, but I didn't know how to do it. You use these analogies like, every morning you're waking up and you have a rock in front of you and a hill, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to carry that rock up that hill. And some days you have a massive boulder and
Mm-hmm.
Mount Everest. And to me, I remember when I was just watching this, I had tears in my eyes, because it took me back to when it was the darkest moments of my life. And it's like, yeah, it was just tough to carry that weight. And I'm glad I was able to make it through. But how do you come up with that analogy? Because it explains perfectly what somebody could feel when they're very depressed.
Actually came up with it in the middle of that TEDx talk. That's not the way it was supposed to end. I realized that the story of Sisyphus, the Greek, I think he may have been a semi god or just somehow connected with the gods, Apollo and those guys. And he did something wrong. I can't remember what it was. And they punished him by saying, look, you roll this rock uphill every day. You get it over the top, you're done. You can go home. And of course, as it says, as I told the story, well, he rolled the rock up the hill every day, and just about the time he got to the top, rolled back down the bottom. So it occurred to me that that's what mental illness is like. Is it every day you wake up with a rock and a hill? And as you said, someday the rock is small, the hill is not so steep. Someday the rock is a boulder, and it's Everest. But every day you wake up with a rock and a hill. And I think at the end I said, my job is to make sure that when you wake up tomorrow morning, you can still move the rock. Because I think Robin Williams, Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade woke up and they couldn't budge the rock, and that was it.
Yeah, and it's hard because a lot because sometimes even when we try to help people, uh, s- for some people it feels like nothing can help. They are on that mindset, on that thing. It's like no, it's just it's almost like they are drowning in a glass of water. Even when you're trying to give way of how to improve, or just trying to give some pointers like, hey, I'm trying my best to help you. But I guess in many cases people don't need are not looking for solutions or help. They're just trying to express and to vent and to be listened and seen, I guess.
Yeah, people say, what should I say if somebody's depressed? Well, don't say anything. Just listen. Oftentimes, just listen. You don't have to fix them. It's and don't try to fix them. And I also say, look, don't bring your philosophies and your religiosity to the meeting. Park your religious beliefs about suicide. Even if you firmly believe that you go to hell when you die by suicide, don't share that unless the other person is of the same mind. Because somebody said it to me one time after I came so close, our next door neighbor. He said, if you'd killed yourself, you'd gone to hell. And I said, here's what you don't know. I was already there.
Bingo.
Yep.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I went to a Catholic school and I heard that a lot.
Yeah.
Those who commit suicide just go to hell. But then what 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 they also tell you is that everyone has their time and place. Your destiny is already written down, right? And so to me, it's like, okay, so if I commit suicide, that was already in my destiny. I mean, it was already that because you cannot cheat death and you cannot cheat God. So if that's the case, then I was supposed to die by suicide, not by my choice, because there's no free will. Then how come I'm going to go to hell if it was already written?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know,
Well, and
always.
as George
Mhm.
Carlin said after one of the Vatican changed the rules at some point. George Carlin, the comedian, said, the Vatican just changed the rules. You can now eat meat on Friday. You know what that means? There are people in hell on a meat wrap.
There you go. I mean, it's like you died too early. You died too early. You just didn't get to enjoy that free pass of eating meat on Fridays.
Exactly.
Man, that is who knows what is what the afterlife is like. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. If somebody is of that religion and just strongly believe that, okay, mention that. Hey, you know that if you kill yourself, you're going to hell. And as you're you're gonna hear, what's the difference? I'm
Yeah.
already there anyway.
Yep. But if
And
they if they're firmly, if they're a good Catholic, that may stop them from dying
from
by
actually
suicide. If
doing,
you remind them, hey, don't you know you're Catholic, right? Seems to me there's some kind of rule about you know.
yeah, makes sense. No, seriously, Frank, I feel that what you're doing is great. I feel that um, more people should try to bring awareness, and you're helping normalizing this. Again, not so many people do this, and I'm hoping to do, and that's why I brought you here, just to put more gasoline into that fire, into creating that awareness. Yeah, we have a lot of awareness of mental health, mental health, men's depression, loneliness, anxiety, all of that, but we're still not addressing the suicide part. And I'm very it is very inspiring what you're doing, especially because I've experienced a lot of depression, and having somebody who freely, like we had just a conversation about that, if I were asking this question to somebody else, people would feel awkward. It's like, okay, are you asking how he's not killing himself yet or whatever?
Yeah.
So it is a breath of fresh air just talking to somebody who can also understand and spread the word, just to say something. But as a closing question, Frank,
Yep.
when it all gets too dark, what helps you find the light?
My mother got pregnant, carried it to term, and it died shortly after birth. She got pregnant again, carried it to term, and died shortly after birth. Somewhere, somehow, she found the courage to try a third time, and I was born, and a fourth time, my sister was born. So my feeling is, what keeps me around is she was so brave and worked so hard to get me here that I have to be at least as brave and work at least as hard to stick around until my appointed time.
Yeah, it would be almost like kind of a disservice or a slap on her face
Yes,
not to.
not to stick
Yeah,
around.
yeah. I mean, I love it, and that is one question I like to ask people, because we all have different. We all deal with different things, right? But we all use different methods of pulling ourselves out of it. And when I ask a question, I mostly ask for the people to think about it, but also to show others, hey, you're not alone. You're not the only one who you live in dark moments, and you can sort of relate to other people. So your answer was, beautiful, and it makes total sense. And I'm glad that you found something that nobody can take away from you. It's not, well, because I have the house, or because I'm married, or because I have
Yeah.
it's just my mom did my best. My mom did her best to bring me here. I'm not gonna let her down. Where can people find you if they wanna do like a TEDx talk, or just take one of your courses?
Howtomakemoneyspeaking.com. Howtomakemoneyspeaking.com.
Speaking.com. Awesome. Well, Frank, was a total pleasure. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah,
And man, this was great.
my pleasure. Send me a link
Thank
when you
you.
post it, and I'll put it all over my social media.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.